Fantastic. Josh, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Galina. I'm so excited to be here.
Busy times for you.
Yeah, I guess it's always busy times.
You just
Um,
re-released your documentary.
I just sort of. I had like a huge lawsuit that I can't unfortunately get more into other than it's over.
Oh, I'm missing the
And
tea.
yeah, I'm sorry, the TA I'm not even allowed to get into. But point is, I have all the rights back to my movie, and it's just been re-put out on Amazon, who had released it originally back in 2021 when it came out before things went haywire and it got taken down. But yeah,
Well,
it's back.
congratulations on it
Thank you.
being
Thank you.
back. What is it like? Tell me about it, because I know that it's a documentary about Al Lubell. Is that his name?
Alubel, yeah.
Al Lubell, but I don't know anything outside of that. So enlighten me.
So Al is like my child, like he's just one of my favorite comedians from childhood. I would say arguably my favorite comedian from childhood, who I only discovered because I randomly went to my local comedy club having no idea who the headliner was, and this guy just made me laugh harder than anyone I'd ever seen in my life. And I was like, how have I not heard of this guy before? So I started like looking him up, and I found out he kind of had like an interesting semi rise, but never just hit that crazy level of fame that some people hit. And then when I was 18, I asked him if I could do a doc about him, and he said no. And then when I was 30, he had fallen on harder times and was like, I'll do anything.
Wow.
And then he let me make this movie.
Were you still hitting him up 12 years later, or did he just
I
remember you
kind
and
of
find you?
like well no well what had happened was I hadn't like forgotten about him, but I just kind of like went to college and was like living my life and made a web series and all this stuff. And randomly one day I don't even know why, I just like looked him up, and I looked him and I saw he was doing a show in LA that day. So I went to go see the show, and it was great. It was just as good as I remembered. And I tweeted at him being like, "Hey Al, really loved your show. Would love to talk to you about making something." And then 4 years later, he responded being like, "Hey Josh, just saw your tweet, and yeah, would love to meet up." And then I met up with him, and the rest is 9 years of history.
Dang, that's. Did you always want to make a documentary, or is it just him that was like the impetus of
Just
making
him.
it?
Like
Yeah.
he was like the like just when I was a kid and I saw him and I thought he was so funny, I thought he would be. It's funny. I thought he would be maybe a funnier documentary than what it is. I still think the documentary is really funny, but I think it ended up being a much deeper, more interesting documentary than what I had originally conceived of in my high school brain.
That's just such a wild. I was not expecting you to have that epic of a timeline for a project.
Well, I was talking to somebody recently about how crazy it is that like this seemingly innocuous moment of my life ended up being one of the most pivotal moments of my entire life, which is my like high school best friend and I hanging out at my house. And he had like, I feel bad about this. He had a very annoying laugh to the point where his alcoholic father once was like, if he does that annoying laugh, I give you my permission to smack
Oh
him.
no.
Because he was like trying to change his son's laugh, which is like horrible. But that being said, he was at my house and we were just like goofing around, and he just was like giggling a lot, and it was annoying my dad. And my dad just kept hearing us, and he comes into my room. He's like, why don't you guys go to the comedy club? Because he just hears us laughing so much, and it
Like,
was
go
bothering.
laugh where they
Yeah,
laugh.
yeah, go laugh. Why don't you guys go to the comedy club tonight? Because he just wanted us out of the house. So we went, and that's where I discovered this guy I would have never, ever discovered otherwise, which set my whole life off on this bizarre course.
It's a butterfly effect moment.
It is. It is. It's crazy. It is really like crazy how that night of my friend having an annoying laugh that was bothering my dad, which made him tell us to go to the comedy club, changed my life forever.
It's kind of weirdly parallel to my story, because I was not into stand up at all, had no intention of doing it, didn't know beyond like household name comedians, just truly didn't care about it. And one night one of my close friends and I just needed something to do as a pregame before we hit the bars. And she like had free tickets to go to the Comedy Store. And I was like, "Oh, okay, that sounds like a
What year is
fun
this?
activity." 2014.
Okay.
And so we went to the
10
show
years ago.
10 years ago. Yeah, it's crazy coming up on my 10 year. I have a lot of feelings about that, but side note. Um, we went to the show, and I was like, in this moment in my life where I really didn't know what I wanted to do career wise. Felt totally uninspired. I felt like I was having a quote unquote quarter life crisis. And we're sitting there watching the show in the original room, and I didn't know who anybody was on the lineup. But at one point during the night, I just had this epiphany of like, I'm sorry, is this a job? Do I want this
and the
job?
answer was no.
The answer was no.
And the answer was no. This is not a job.
My
This is
innocent brain
this
didn't
is an
know.
added expense. And that
Honestly.
was when you became a notary.
Yeah, but that was a pivotal moment that almost didn't happen either. Because if my friend didn't have like free tickets to go to the show that night, I don't know that I would have stumbled upon this. And yet it's like, oh, cool. My
If
whole life
only
is structured
if
around it
only
now.
you guys got into a car accident and gone to the ER, you'd be there under a surgeon's knife being like, "Is
Mhm.
this a job?" And now you'd be a wealthy surgeon.
Yeah. But then I
It was
wouldn't
just
be here
whatever
podcasting.
you ended up doing that night was going to end up being what you became.
It's the equivalent of when a man is ready for marriage and he just settles down with
You
the
guys
first
turn
woman in
down
front of
you
him.
guys turn down a bad street, you're suddenly down this alley, there's all these prostitutes. You're like, "Is this a job?"
Yeah. In a parallel universe, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, that moment, whatever happened, that was the night that was going to
Uh-huh.
set you off on whatever course you went.
Yeah, but I mean, no one's annoying
But
laugh set it
here's the
off.
thing. Both your story and my story, I think, like, while there's so much good that came from making the doc, I still look at it like, was that night a blessing or a curse?
Yeah, same.
Because there has been so much incredible, both emotional and financial hardship
Right.
on me from pursuing, helping, not just helping him out in like this altruistic, I only did this for Al. I did it for me,
Hmm.
every bit as much, if not more. But but in doing that,
Well, you obviously had help, right? Like, who did you pull in to work on it with you?
yeah, I don't want to talk about
Oh, that's okay. You can't.
that.
Sure, we'll skip over
My
that.
producer, Daniel
Mhm.
Marino, one of my best friends from high school, I could not have gotten to where I got without him.
Amazing.
My editor, Alex Russick,
Hmm.
really helped out. Co-editor, we
Yeah.
edited it together. Well, I had edited the movie, and then he came in, and he was like, "I think you should put another year of work into this."
Wow.
And then I did, and then he came in and like did like the finishing touches that I think really took it over the top. And it's rare, people have said things to me about art before that art is uh art is never finished, only abandoned.
Hmm.
And I think it's been very true for me throughout my life. Like every time I even put out like an Instagram video that I work too hard on for the amount of views and likes I get,
Yeah.
I look at it and I go, I wish I could change this one thing. I wish I could change this one thing. But it's like you have to accept it. You've set it out into the world with all its flaws and everything. But I don't know. I really don't know. When I watch back the doc, it's like one of the only things in my life. I'm like, I don't know if there's something I'd change about it.
That's an amazing place to get to it. But because art is so subjective just by nature, there is no point at which you can just all of a sudden decide, oh, I'm going to be a perfectionist about it and not put the work out right. You will never get anything done that way.
Oh, I mean, I made a web series prior to the doc. I spent 4 years making that.
Wow.
And I've plenty of horrible mistakes I've made along the way, in career decisions, not so much the web series decisions, but after I released all the episodes, there was something that bothered me horribly about one,
Mm.
and I took them all down, changed that thing, and then re-uploaded all of them as one of just the many mistakes I made.
Did you get criticism about doing that?
No, but I just lost all the views I originally had and never like kind of gained back. Like if you look at them now, it looks like a Gods of Egypt level web series bomb.
Which is a
Uh,
reference that I don't even know.
yeah. I'm trying to think. There's definitely a better reference I could make for something that bombed terribly.
Would you do it again, like a documentary?
Would I make a documentary again? I sometimes think about it. You know, it's funny. I had an idea I really wanted to do back in 2019, but I didn't want to put all the effort in that would be necessary.
Are you traumatized a little bit from the
Oh,
LOL one? Yeah.
for sure, without question. But also, I just know I know what it's like to stand at the bottom of the mountain and on the other side. I'm only now, I think, finally on the other side of the mountain. I thought I was over the mountain, but then the clouds cleared and there was a whole bunch more mountain in front
Yeah.
of me. But I honestly, it's like I'm on the other side of the volcano after that project. But but I had really wanted to make a documentary in 2019 about all the slotted mics in LA, like the birth of just this new kind of open mic scene in
Yeah.
Los Angeles and the feuds between them and all of this stuff, and like really like looking at it all now, if I had like started making it then, continued working on it through the pandemic and got to now where like the dust has settled on it. What an epic story that would have been, with such interesting characters. It would have been a
Yeah.
totally different type of documentary, but I think a very fun one in its
But
own
a
right.
very niche as it gets.
But I think like people would be interested in it. I think like, but here's the thing for me. Okay.
I
It's
think
like,
any comedy fan
But
could
like, but
potentially
like
be
my
interested.
documentary that already exists is niche. Like
Yeah.
who? Like you're like Al Lubell is his
Yeah.
name. Like I didn't make a movie about Robin Williams,
Right.
and it's like sure, like a documentary about Robin Williams is great. A documentary about Steve Martin is great, and they exist and they're great. But also, I watch them and I'm like, oh yeah, Mrs. Doubtfire. I remember when that came out. Oh yeah, the Berg. Oh yeah, Father of the Bride Part 3. I'm just like, I'm like, we already know their story. We
Right.
lived their story. It's like, those documentaries are great and they add things you don't know here and there, but it's a lot of like member berries. Like, remember this? And you're like, oh, look at this scene from this movie I've already watched. Where it's like, with Al, you get a story about someone who you get to like discover. It's like, I want to show you something you don't know about. And I feel like, yeah, there is a niche quality to the slotted scene, but also there's like a story in there about capitalism. There's a story in there about like trying to make it in comedy, all the different things we have to do, all the different like, I also think there was a really interesting element to it all for me that I think almost mirrored our politics in a way, where
Oh.
yeah, because like to me, there like there's Burt's and Fourth Wall, which would have been like the central part of the story, which is kind of like a Trump versus Hillary in its own right. I used to joke. I used to be like, I'm with Burt's, build the fourth wall. Those were like and then there were the people who were like so adamantly against like the slotteds that were like open mic should be free, and they were like the Bernies of that world. I'm like, there was this whole kind of thing that I think Bert, like Fourth Wall, like it invented it. And also the story would have started with Marty's. This is getting so niche now. But
Yeah.
Marty's is like sort of the OG of it all.
Yeah, it really is. Just to give like a touch of background, these slotted mics, you go to a website, there's like 10 to 12 to 15 spots, and you sign up for one, you get to the mic, it's $5 for 5 minutes, and
You have to stay the whole time.
you have to stay the whole
Which is the
time.
model that Joe invented.
Yeah.
And the model that like everyone has seen. It's like crazy. You look at this, like, I love Joe. You look at this psycho in his like sleeping inside of his business that he
Hmm.
created, which has like created he created a business model. You'd never look at Joe Menente and think here, like before creating Slotted, and think here is a future business pioneer of the
Yeah. An
comedy industry.
entrepreneur.
Seriously. Seriously. I mean, Marty's was like, if you ever been to Marty's, I used to describe Marty's as like, Marty is a guy who I'm pretty sure got banned from every open mic,
Hmm.
so started his own. And he created the first like place that was an open mic that you went to, you paid $5, and you got to do 5 minutes of comedy. There wasn't kind of the rules of like people having to stay for their time, and you couldn't sign up online in advance, which is really where Joe took it.
Hmm.
But you could go to Marty's and perform for Marty, and he would perform for you, and you could be the only two people in there.
Yeah.
But I thought there was I thought there were a lot of interesting stories and characters.
Marty's was traumatic, and we call them Slotteds because it's the website is
Slotted, yeah. The web
slotted.co.
they're called
Yeah,
Slotted because Joe used this website. Which he doesn't use anymore,
which is so funny.
which was called Slotted, where you
And
go to
it's still called Slotted.
slotted.co.
Yeah.
And most of the other ones, if not all of the other ones, still use Slotted.
I did one last night that was so horrendous, and I don't want to like call the mic out because I have been to this mic and really enjoyed it. It just like I guess was like an off night or whatever. But what ended up happening was the chairs were so tight together, and originally I sat down and I had like a space open next to me, and some guests came, which is already like, why are you watching an open mic? This is going to be horrible. But a real audience came, and so I had to move over, and I ended up stuck with like two large men on either side of me that were like not smelling particularly wonderful, that were just like really encroaching on my space. Like I would lean forward and then they would lean forward, so I would lean back and then they would lean back, and I'm like, can we stop doing this tango? I'm trying to get some space. And just one kid went up who, as many people who attend open mics like should be institutionalized, like has no place doing comedy, and just had like the craziest, strangest, most uncomfortable set ever. And he went up like second or third. So it just ruined the vibe of the entire mic. And then nobody did well. And I felt like I was stuck in the middle seat on just a terrible flight with no Wi Fi. Like that was the feeling. And because it was slotted, I couldn't leave.
Those are the rules.
Yeah,
Those are the rules, but they're like imaginary rules to a degree. I
I
wonder which
guess.
one it is because I see people leave them all the time.
Yeah, it probably wasn't one. It wasn't one of the ones you mentioned. And again, I don't want to like tear anybody down or have anybody figure out what it is, but it was just because it got so bad so early. That hour, man, it felt like 4 hours.
A lot of people are very against them. I like that they exist. I
We
like
kind
being
of
able
don't
to
have a way around it anymore. It's primarily most of the mics that are like readily available these days that you know you can rely on them to be there, and you know you can get 5 minutes and a captive audience no matter what.
and not be sitting there for like, I quit comedy a couple of
Did
times.
you?
A couple of times. Yeah, early on, like I was doing it years before I was really doing it. And one of the major reasons was, and maybe this is good, maybe this is why people want it to be back this way, was like I would go to mics and I would just, because I was the new person, I'd have to wait 4 hours to perform for two people.
Hmm.
And I'd be like, I just can't do this.
I get it. Did you start in LA?
I sort of started in New York,
Okay.
but like I started in New York in that I took a comedy class and then I did a bringer show like once every few months, and that was about it. I went to like maybe like 5 open mics in that entire like first year. Um and then I moved to LA and I started going to like one, maybe 2 mics a week, like what I was describing. And then I got a nighttime job and I just quit for like 8 years.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So it was that. I didn't realize it was that big of a stretch.
But like I always say it's weird to say I quit for 8 years or that I was it's always hard to describe like how long we've been doing comedy because I'm like, when does it count from? Does it count from when I took that comedy class?
Hmm.
I also was a professional magician for 5 years.
Stop it. We'll circle back to
Yeah,
that.
performing regularly and like doing comedy more than I was doing magic when I was doing that. I made this web series, I made the documentary about stand-up comedy. I had a podcast that was kind of popular for a while. So I was constantly doing comedy adjacent stuff. So it wasn't like when I came back in 2018 that I was like brand new comic.
Hmm.
Like people would be like I just started in 2018. I'd be like a month in. They're like, you're really good for a month, and I'm like, but it not really a
Yeah, it's
month.
not a month.
I had a book full of jokes I'd written
Yeah,
that I still nervously looked at because I still felt uncomfortable.
of course. It's everybody has their own trajectories. Like when I went hard in the paint immediately. Like I can tell you my anniversary is like December 6th, 2014, and I did like a handful of mics in that first month, and then the new year started, a couple weeks after my first mic, and I did 365 spots like a freaking lunatic in 2015. All I did was try to get up every night, multiple mics a night because I was like, well, that's what you're supposed to do. Because I kept listening to all these comedians on podcasts being like, you just have to do a ton of it. And I was like, cool, great. Let me set my entire life aside and just immediately start grinding. So there was never a pause for me other than the pandemic pause.
Question. Do you feel like you ever and this is referring when I ask you this question, I'm not referring to you. I'm referring to myself, but I'm
Hmm.
curious about your answer
Yeah.
too. Do you ever have moments where you just look at yourself and go, "Oh, I was delusionally insane for like
You
a
have to
stretch."
be.
Well, like the it's a delusionally insane thought that got me back into stand-up comedy that I
Yeah.
had. What got me to go hard at stand-up comedy was the craziest thing that like I could have ever that like any comic who's been doing it for a while would think this is nuts, which is I wrote a movie that I wanted to star in. And I had people who were like interested in making the movie, but they're like, you can't star in this movie, Josh. Nobody knows or cares who you are. And I was like, well, I'll just get famous at stand up comedy real quickly, and then I can star in this
Yeah.
movie. And I was like, all right, I gotta go get famous real fast. And then I just started going, like, if I go really hard at stand up comedy, I'll just get famous real quick. And we are now 6 years later, and I'm like, barely at 5,000 Instagram followers.
Yeah, well, that's because the goalpost changed
It
and
did.
moved so much. Like when I started 10 years ago, it was not about social media at all. Everybody was like, the cream rises to the top. Oh, you just have to do it all the time and you'll get noticed and somebody will help you and da da da. And this is the order of operations. You get a Conan set and then you get a Comedy Central half hour and somebody takes you on the road and then you quote unquote graduate to headlining. And now it's like, well, have at least 100,000 followers so you can sell tickets and then we can talk about you headlining. So
I
it's,
know. And I really think that goalpost actually changed mainly as a result of the pandemic.
yeah,
Because it really felt to me, I'll say that like one thing I did really feel is heading into the pandemic, I felt very much like on that upward trajectory of the
same.
normal way that things were. Like it really felt like our class, I feel like my class was constantly fucked. Because I graduated college in 2007, right when the financial crisis happened. I was like exiting high school, like right after 9/11. I and then like my stand up like upward trajectory was happening. And then I always say this, I quit social media during the pandemic for my mental health.
Which was peak time to
Got
grow
out
your
of the
base.
pandemic, got
Yeah.
out of the pandemic so that all my friends had gotten famous on social media. My mental health has never been worse.
I mean, same. And as I was walking my dog this morning, I was just thinking about because I view it as classes too. I'm like my class of my peers and other people that are in certain places. I feel like when I started, I had this idea that it took about 8 to 10 years that was kind of, and of course it's an average and there's outliers in either direction and there's certainly people that like never quote unquote make it, but I had this idea that it was going to be roughly a decade, and so that has me like all fucked up this year because now I have my 10-year anniversary and it's like, oh, this it's supposed to be mile marker moment and I'm like not where I thought I would be. And the people who like started after me who have gotten to a level where like they can headline, it's because of social media. And then everybody else, for the most part, I feel like it's taking them about 12 to 15 years. So I think that the average moved up, and I think that's there's two causes of that, and one huge one is social media has changed the structure of
Well,
things.
it's like either you're like there in a year because of social media,
Yeah, but then the
or
skill is not there. Like, I don't care what anyone says, you cannot get funny that quickly. You can't find your voice that quickly. You can't do
totally,
an hour that quickly.
totally. But there is somebody, as someone told me a very interesting story. And actually, I have not seen this guy around as much anymore, but this guy who got like 10 million followers during the pandemic,
Hmm.
like 10 million.
Dang.
Um, and he was taking my friend to open for him. And he would be like, his friend would go up, he's like, I'd have a good set. And then he would come out on stage, and the audience would just be going crazy for him, like he was the Beatles.
Wow.
And like, he didn't even have to do that much material because they're just screaming and going wild and yelling at him to like do his TikToks on stage. And that was that.
Yeah, I guess it exists, right? Like all of that is also a good example, but as just like more of a purist, I don't think there's like a good comedian, like joke writer, performer, someone who can actually hold it down, someone who can pivot when you need to, do crowd work, just have all those skills. You're not going to develop those skills in a year.
At the same time, I mean, it's funny, I work for a really good crowd work comedian. I mean, he also has a good act,
Hmm.
but he does a lot of crowd work. And like something I've noticed in like editing his clips is it's like he's big enough now where the audience comes like hoping to be his crowd work,
Of course.
hoping to be the clip. And
Yeah.
it's such a different type of, it's such a different thing. Like if I were to go on stage and like immediately, and I've experienced this, immediately start talking to the audience, there's like nervous, there's
Hmm.
tenseness, there's like don't talk to me, who are you? I didn't. What was I saying?
You're working for a
Oh,
person that
oh,
does crowd
oh.
work.
If I didn't have to like when I'm doing it, like they get tense and stuff. It's like if the audience was coming there hoping I'd talk to them. It's like there are times where he'll be like, uh, "Hey, what's your king?" He's like, "I like to get pegged." It's like they came to like tell you. They came to the show like, I can't wait to like shout to the world my biggest darkest secret on
Hoping
this
to get
guy's
clipped.
Instagram.
Yeah, that's so true. That's definitely part of what happened during the pandemic. That's like a
Not to
huge
take
thing.
anything away from, I mean, he
Yeah,
got big enough because he was doing the crowd work to people who were
right.
not doing that, which got him to the place where it's become much easier, I'd
And it's
say.
still a skill set. No, crowd work is also a skill set that needs to be
Totally,
honed
totally, totally.
and worked on for years. I don't, again, like, I guess my only argument is, oh, brand new people aren't going to be good at crowd work either.
No. But I don't know. You know, it's funny. It's like I don't love it. I don't hate it, but like it's not. I don't like how much people want it.
Yeah, and that didn't used to exist pre-pandemic, and then we
Exactly.
saw like the Matt Rifes pop off, and that's what it is now. That's the
Well, I
expectation.
think there's like this belief. I think the audiences have this sort of belief that that the real magic is watching someone who's able to be funny in the moment. And I'm
Hmm.
just like, I don't know, to me the real magic is someone who's able to write like a great joke. I'm so much more interested in like constructed thought
Me too.
that like gets me to laugh than crowd. I mean, sometimes that happens in crowd work, but most of the time, I watched a Kevin Nealon crowd work clip the other day that was great. But it was also Kevin Nealon reluctantly doing crowd work because it
Hmm.
was like a heckler he was dealing with.
That's
But
kind of how Dave Attell operates, and I'm like, oh, that's one of the greatest comedians alive, and it's because of his joke
same with
structure
Kevin
that I'm
Nealon,
like,
another one of the greatest
yeah,
comedians alive.
absolutely. But
Also in my documentary, Mentally Al.
oh, nice plug. But those aren't, not to say he reluctantly does crowd work, but it's definitely not his thing, and it's not the thing that has gotten him like the absolutely like unwavering support and adoration of fellow comedians.
Well, there like I marvel at the Kevin Nealon clip, also because like it's sort of clear that he didn't necessarily like that he didn't want to be dealing with this person, but he dealt with them so deftly and never made it seem like he didn't want to deal with them. It was like just this woman who's like, I have a question. He's like, oh, good. I was wondering when somebody. He was just just the ease with which he went with it was so good. And then she said she was from Belarus, and then he started just talking in like a fake language to her. And then she was like in English, like, "What's your name?" And she's like, "Helena." He's like, "Belarus," and it was just so like you should watch the clip. I'm butchering it,
Mhm.
but I love that. I love that, and it's funny when I went on tour. I went on tour last year, and it was like the first time I did like 30 cities, and I got to do like an hour every night. And it's such a difference. Like when you're doing 10 minutes in Los Angeles, sometimes 10 minutes if you're lucky, 8 minutes,
Right.
7 minutes on occasion. Um, you're like, okay, I'm going to go on stage. If I'm going to go up here and do crowd work, that's going to eat up half of my time.
Right.
And if
Just to
that
even get them
doesn't go
warm.
well, I've now bombed half of my set,
Yep.
and I'm going to stick in less than a slotted mic's worth of material into the end of this. Well, what did I get out of this at all?
Right.
Um, where it's like when I was doing an hour every night, it's like at 20 minutes into your act, you're if it's going well or if it's going even okay, there's a feeling of like in conversation with the audience that I would find where it's like maybe I'm doing word for word my act, but like it doesn't feel like I'm monologuing at them. It feels like I'm talking to them. And then when something happens, the conversation is eased and it's so much easier to like jump into a moment with them and be off the cuff and be in crowd work with them because everyone's at ease. That first 10 minutes is actually, it's funny, what you get in LA is the worst part of doing stand up.
Yeah, doing short sets is so difficult.
When you're doing a long set, like the worst part is usually that first 10 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. And
I
it's all showcase style here, so there's very few clubs in LA that let you headline.
when you like there were plenty of times where I had a rough 5 minutes out of the gate on the road. And it's like again, you could have a rough 5 minutes, get your bearings, have a great 55 minutes, walk out being like, what a fun set.
Right, but
You
you
have a
need time to
rough five
recover.
minutes in LA, maybe you have 2 minutes left.
Hmm.
And it's usually that last 2 minutes is not going to go well because you're just desperate to get anything to make yourself feel like a worthy human
It's
being of
true.
love.
That's why we do it ultimately, so that we're worthy of love. I like that you spend a lot of time because I'm such a fan of these like jokey these videos that you do where you're making fun of comedy and
Oh,
it's
thank
it's
you.
so like breaking the fourth wall and while I might say it's niche, it also is relatable to anyone in any creative field, I feel like. But how come, like, what made you decide that that's what you want to focus on?
So a couple of things. One, I've had a bunch of people being like, why do you keep doing these? And I'm like, well, these are a lot of the ideas that are just coming to me. And I'm like, I'm making this or I'm not making anything right now. So I might as well make this. Um, and I have made things that aren't as niche and a lot of those have not done as well. So I'm like, okay, well, I make this one that's very generic and universal, and it does meh because my audience isn't really. But like a lot of those are getting lots of shares,
Hmm.
and they are bringing in new people more than the other ones. But the actual truth is, what started it was it's going to be. This is not good advice. What I'm about to tell you. This is not good advice. I was on antidepressants for a few years, and I decided to go off of them with the supervision of my therapist. Also, I just because I want to make sure this is known that this is not good advice. But once I went off of them, you know, it's like it's not like I was writing a lot. I wrote a lot of great material on the antidepressants. I had a lot of productivity, but something happened where I started to like feel intensely again. And most of these videos come from just a moment where I feel something intensely and I'll just be like like, I don't know, just for example, the one I made the other day, I don't know if you saw the Hurt music video. Um,
No.
Oh, I made one the other day that was the Johnny Cash cover of the Nine Inch Nails song Hurt. And it was like when I post something to Instagram, and
Yeah.
it was me watching the video I made earlier that day that had 9 likes. And it was just playing, I hurt myself today. And I just made like a short little music. Cause like I posted this video and like it was getting nothing.
Hmm.
And it felt terrible. And I was feeling awful, and then that song just started like clicking with me in my head of like, I hurt myself today, and I was like, this is what the experience is, and like, let me just make this now. And then that video did all right. Some people I think found it cringe, but actually there's kind of the joke in it for me was
Yeah.
how intensely cringe it
But
is,
I
but it's
love
also
that.
true. Like that's how it feels. It's
That's how it
like
feels. And that's not just comedy,
you're
that's relatable to everybody.
putting yourself out there and everyone's like, no. Fuck you. So it's like, yeah. So just like when something starts to like, I went to a comedy competition where just like every one of us that's ever been at a comedy competition is sure we're the greatest one there.
Yeah.
And we obviously deserve to win. And everyone was telling us that we were the best one, but somebody else won. And I just made a video of me like sitting there while they're announcing the winners, being like, you had a great time. You made a lot of friends. Whatever happens, happens. And then they announce someone else, and I'm like, I'm going to burn this place to the ground. They're like, go, Chris.
And Chris is a 19-year-old who does impressions.
Yeah, but it's it's just like I don't know, I just started like trying to really like delve it for a long time. I was like, I don't know how to make content
Hmm.
for this algorithm. I don't know what to do. And
I
then
don't
it's
think I
like,
do either. No, I know I don't because I don't have a following.
well, what kind of answered that question for me is like it's like, okay, when I post the thing that got 9 likes, I also didn't like particularly love the thing that got
Hmm.
9 likes, but I'm like, I should post, let me make a thing, let me put it out there. And then when I made the next video about how that made me feel, I was like, well, now I'm really expressing myself. And I find like a pleasure in the expression. And it actually took the pain that I was feeling away to put it into expression.
Hmm.
So when I did that, I felt much better.
I try to shift my thinking, especially like this year in prepping for having all these feelings about my anniversary and where I'm at. I was just like, I gotta take the just like the conclusion. I gotta take the outcome out of my productivity and out of my art and just be happy with what I'm making for me and be like, I think it's funny. That's the most important part. It's something I enjoy, so I'm gonna post it and I'm gonna be happy about the actual clip itself, the joke itself, whatever it is I'm putting out, and stop being so worried about the outcome because I can't control the outcome and thinking about it all the time just drives me absolutely crazy.
Well, I always say, or I used to say early on in doing stand up round two, 2018, that, once I started to really love it, I was like, all right, Josh, you've learned. Once I got past I got to get famous in 2 weeks from stand up comedy, that I was like, you got to do this because you love it, and everything else is gravy.
Hmm.
And it's like, once you start wanting that gravy, is once it starts being bad. And
Yeah.
it's like, I'll notice so many people that are succeeding so wildly that are constantly complaining about all the things they don't have. And I'm like, on one hand, I'm like, yeah, probably you're getting all the things I want because you're never satisfied with what you have. But if you only took a moment to like look at all the things you had, it's hard. It's hard. I mean, like I have another video I've been like wanting to make, which is just a lot of work, but it's like, you go on Instagram and it's just let's scroll through all the things we don't have.
Hmm.
All the everyone like showing you the best of their life and making you feel shitty about what you're doing. But if you're able to take that step back and look at what you are doing, what you do have, you'll be like, okay, things are going pretty well for me in all honesty. And it's like all the time I'll just be feeling low, like I didn't get this or I didn't get that, or these people don't want me, or that thing rejected me. And then someone will say something to me like, hey man, you're killing it. And it's like, oh, I guess I am from this person's perspective.
Well, when you're running a race, you don't see anyone who's behind you. You see people that are running alongside you, and mostly you see who's in front of you. So that
Hmm.
seems to be all that matters. But the wild thing is, as soon as you get any of these milestone things, like oh, something hits a million, or you get a slew of followers, you get whatever. Name your goal. That goal is not going to feel as good as you think it's going to feel. And then after about 90 seconds, if you do get the elation, you do get the joy from it, it is going to fade so fast, and you are going to be right back to that zone of want of like, oh God, what's the next thing? Like, you're not going to be able to sit there and relish in the joy of this thing that you thought, like, you really thought, oh, I'm going to get to a million on this and I'm going to feel so good. And you do, but after 90 seconds, it's gone.
Yeah, until if your next video doesn't get it.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny, the person I edit for, I remember one time I was like, how'd that clip we edited do the other day? He's like, all right, about 600,000 views, didn't kill. And I was like, I would literally kill
Yeah.
you to have 600,000 views on one of my videos.
Yeah. Yeah, but you just start, everything becomes the new normal and you adapt to whatever that level of success is. So if you don't keep yourself grounded and try to base your enjoyment in life in other things, then you're never going to be able to like it the way you anticipated liking it.
Well, I have this like I don't know, it's not my theory, but I guess I'll take it as
Hmm.
my theory on depression and success, where it's like, you know, I would say comedians aren't depressed because you have to be depressed to be funny. I don't think that's true. In fact, I think I write better when I'm feeling good in lots of ways, even though that's counterintuitive to what I was just explaining
Hmm.
about making Instagram things. But oftentimes I'm writing some of my best stuff when I'm in a good place. Sometimes when I'm too depressed, I can't do anything.
Yeah, you have no energy.
I'm paralyzed. But I think like being depressed helps you suffer through the hell that is this business in order to, because I'm always like, if you're a happy person and you go to one open mic, you're going to be like, that was horrible. Why did I do that? My life is way better. Not there. You have to be so miserable that your life is better at the open mic, bombing in front of a bunch of other miserable people, than not there. And it's like people don't change the world because they're happy with the way the world is.
Yeah.
It's like I read a biography on Thomas Edison who was talking about how he was depressed. And I was like, of course, he lives in a world of darkness. He needed there to be light. If you're happy with the way the world is, then you're happy. Then you're not going out and trying
Is
to
anyone
change
happy
it.
with the way things are? Do you know anyone?
No, but you get what I mean.
Yeah.
If you're like life is good, you're not going out and trying to constantly.
What a psychopath you would have to be like, everything's good. I'm completely content with my life and myself as a person and the world around me.
There are people. There are psychos.
Is that that's where ignorance is bliss comes from, I suppose.
I guess so.
Yeah.
But it's also it's like the scary thing is it's like you set like this lofty goal for yourself, and if you think that like achieving X is going to make you happy, what you're going to find is that you will do beg, borrow, cheat, steal, kill, fight, whatever to get here. And as soon as you get there and then you realize you don't have the happiness you thought that would bring, you didn't gain this. You lost the one thing that was supposed to make the pain you feel go away.
That's the fucked up trick of life. That's the like punchline on all
Because
of
it
us.
makes you believe if you could just get this
Yeah.
thing.
And
And
no
you
one wants
believe
to
it, and you
believe it.
believe it,
Yeah.
and you believe. Everyone believes they're that different person. That if they get it, they'll be happy.
That external things will do it for them, and they don't believe you either. They go, yeah, well, it's easy for you to say, or whatever. Let me just get the thing and prove that it is external things, and then so we chase the external things anyways.
Now that being said, I think there are things like
I mean, you need a certain level of money to be comfortable, to not be stressed out all the time.
To stress relievers.
Stress relievers.
Stress
Yeah,
relievers will answer if you're happy.
100%.
I think that's more true. Like if you have a comfortable, but there's a certain amount of money. Like if you like billionaires are not happy.
No, I
They're
mean, I've
not.
been working for Ferrari for 11 years. I have met so many unhappy millionaires.
They're just not. If you because there's a certain amount of money where all your needs are taken care of,
Right.
and like beyond that, it's just like you're chasing a dragon.
Hmm.
Sure, another yacht's not going to fill the hole in your dead heart.
But then here I am going, yeah, but then like let me onto the yacht.
Can we try it? Can
Yeah,
we? Can we see? Can we
for sure.
see if it will?
We all have to see. We all have to experiment with it.
I don't know. It's great. I mean, you look at the Elon Musks and the Bezoses
Hmm.
and the Trumps, and you're like,
I
these
would
are like
never
the
switch
most
spots with them.
miserable looking
Yeah,
people I see in the world. They walk around with like their misery on full display. It's crazy.
it is. Do you think, I don't want to ask, do you think depression made you funny, but what do you think made you funny?
I think when I was a kid, I was I was picked on, bullied and stuff, and then once I started like realizing I was funny and using that, I like enjoyed it. It brought me joy, and I was like, "Oh, I'm the funniest person in the world." Also, my dad's hilarious, just a very funny person,
Yeah.
and just trickled down, trickled down Jewonomics.
And then you're organized enough to do projects like making movies and stuff because not everybody can even like people will say they want to do that stuff, but there's a much smaller subset that actually go out and do it.
Well, the trick, I mean, it's advice I have for just life in general. But I'll tell you. So I shot the documentary. It was like 2 years of filming, and not like all together in chunks.
Hmm.
But I sat at home at the end of it with like 100 hours of footage and no idea, like no plan in the filming of how I'm going to put this thing together. We just kind of like, I was like, oh, this moment's about to happen. It seems like an important moment to capture. Let's go do it. And I sat there and it was daunting. And I was like, I don't know if I'm capable. Am I going to be a huge embarrassment? Am I a failure? Did I just like do this thing and like I have no like I don't know what to do. And then I took a little post-it note and I wrote on the post-it note, if you do one edit today, you are one edit closer to being done. And I stuck it on my computer. And every day I made sure to do one thing at least. And usually when I do the one thing,
Yeah,
I'd
then you
keep
get in
going.
flow state and then you're doing all the things.
And then you're doing it's like staring at the blank page and like writing something.
Staring at the
If
blank
you write
page before
something
you.
on yeah, if you write something, you'll probably write more.
Hmm.
And some days I would only do the one cut and then the
Yeah.
next day I'd be like that was stupid and I'd undo it, but making that mistake, making the change, it got me closer. And over time, just little by little, somehow it this insurmountable task ended.
Yeah. Is the editing, would you say that was like the hardest part? Or what was the thing that like did anything make you self-conscious while you were doing it? Was anything
Oh,
like, "Oh,
constant.
I don't want to do this part at all, but I have to get over this part and like eat the frog, so to say, in that project where you were like, "Oh, once I get past this, then all of a sudden like the relief is going to come."
Constantly. I mean, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Um, oh, I mean, I was constantly like perpetually worried about embarrassing myself. It's. I was saying this recently. I just shot Liz Glazer's stand-up special,
Oh, cool.
and when I was going into it, I was like, I've put myself in another position where where huge public embarrassment is a possibility, and that's like you got to put yourself in these positions. You got to take the risk of mortifying yourself on a massive public scale in front of all your peers and be okay with that possibility. And it's not about being okay with that possibility, but it's about feeling that stress and that pressure and then letting that motivate you to do what it takes to not let that be the end result.
Right.
And yeah, so it's, like I've done multiple things now where, and I hope to do many more. And there is the chance that one or more of those will result in that. I mean, so many filmmakers make so many films and they make one that's this horrible critical and public bomb, and it's like that person has to sit there and endure that they bared their soul and everyone's literally shitting all over them, and but me too sometimes,
Yeah.
and that's part of it. That's
You
part.
just have to be so vulnerable to even
You got it.
set
Yeah.
foot in the
You
arena.
got to be vulnerable. You got to be vulnerable. If you don't make yourself vulnerable, you're not really trying. I mean, I was like, honestly, even those little Instagram videos I put out, I feel terrified. I always find the more terrified I feel about posting it, the better it usually does.
Because
And the
that's
better I
you're more
feel,
connected to it. That's why.
there's more vulnerability there, and it's speaking to a greater truth inside of us. And I think the end result, comedy, art, all of these things is like about hitting on that truth we feel deep inside of us, and if you can hit on that, you're doing something good.
Yeah. I want to switch gears because I can't believe I just learned that you have a past as a magician.
Oh yeah, you didn't know
I
this?
didn't know this
I
about
still
you.
do it
You
occasionally.
do? What do you
Yeah,
do?
I mean, I have like a comedy. In fact, I'm like currently, so I'm hoping to film my own special for the hour. I've did really a ton last year and done not yet at all this year, but I want to go on tour again, practice the hour, film it, be done ish with it.
Hmm.
Because next year I really, and I don't know if I'll do this. I'm saying this right now, and this might be just a flight of fancy. That's not at all what I'm going to do. But I outlined a new hour long comedy magic show, that I kind of want to do. But yeah, I used to be a professional magician in New York for like four
How
years.
did you get into that?
So I did it as a kid. My dad and my grandpa were both amateur magicians and got me real into magic. And after college, uh, semi quit my first job after a year, needed a job. Saw a sign in a magic shop that said magician wanted, walked in, went, I'm a magician. And they didn't even ask to see a trick. They just hired me.
Wow.
And there was a stage in the place. And I remember being like, hey, why don't we start doing like a free Sunday magic show to bring like people in and I could like demonstrate the tricks. And I started doing the Sunday magic show, and it was like just out of college. So I'm still like in New York raging every night till like 4 a.m.,
Hmm.
showing up to do this free Sunday magic show, hungover out of my mind. And it became like almost a shtick. And then the audiences started getting bigger, and like Time Out New York like wrote a thing about it, and people were coming. And then an agent came and saw me, and she was like, hey, I book magicians. Can I start hiring you for? She was like a clown that also was an agent,
Of course.
and she started booking me on these crazy gigs. Like I did a gig that was like an Alice in Wonderland double-decker bus tour of New York with all these stops where I was like the magician, like leading the tour and doing tricks on the bus while there's an absinthe bar underneath, and we're just stopping at all these places to party all day, and just having just some of the like, most wild experiences of my life. And it was always more like doing comedy than doing magic when I
Yeah.
was doing it.
Every magician I've ever seen always has like their go to. They have their bits, they have their act.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was like I didn't think I was that good at magic, but I thought I was funny, and I was like, I can get away with doing like five tricks if I can make each trick 5 minutes of jokes,
Hmm.
and then that takes care of the 30 minutes I'm supposed to be on stage.
What kind of tricks?
All kinds. I'm not amazing. I've got like a little bit of sleight of hand skill, and then I was always attracted to a trick that I thought was funny, that had like a funny payoff.
I love
So
that. Were you doing card stuff?
I do card stuff. That's where the most of the sleight of hand. I did a lot of cigarette magic. I don't
Oh,
smoke, but it was also a good trick to like pick up girls at bars. Was like go out to the cigarette porch, be like, oh, want to see a magic trick, and then take their cigarette and do a bunch of stuff. Like, wow, you're amazing. It's like, want to go back with me? No.
I was gonna ask, like, did being a magician get you laid?
Sure, not zero. It's definitely, I'd say it's more of like a helper than a end all be all.
Yeah. But there's definitely, and I guess it exists in comedy too, but I feel like magicians, like women throw themselves at successful magicians. Not
Yeah,
all
I
women.
think I think women throw themselves at successful people.
Yeah.
And
True.
like, sure, yeah. Oh, you're a millionaire. You do magic. Yeah, you're a
Yeah.
trickster. That's fine. Whatever gets you rich.
Hmm. Yeah, skill sets can be really appealing because a lot of times, like, I don't know, I don't think that road goes both ways. I
Honestly,
don't think men care about women's skills.
different.
Yeah.
Uh, um, but honestly, comedy has gotten me laid more than magic.
Has it?
Definitely,
Nice. Did the documentary get you laid?
definitely helped.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I would say actually I'm at my most attractive on set. Like directing because
I have the opposite issue.
huh?
I have the opposite issue.
Well, it was funny when I did Liz's special. At the end of the special, you come out
Hmm.
and as a director, and you're like, "Hey, we got to get some pickup things here and there," and I'm like directing the audience, and Liz's wife was telling me that these women were talking behind her in the audience like, "Oh, he's great, he's amazing," like, and I'm just like directing the audience on things to do. So I've always found that I'm definitely at my most attractive on set because know what I'm doing, and
Hmm.
it's like looking in control and seeming important, and all those things
Being
lead
authoritative.
to tricking women into thinking I'm worth dating.
What are your red flags in dating?
What are my problems?
No, what do you see out in the dating world and you're like, these are red flags, these are non-negotiables for me?
Non-negotiables? Oof, I don't know. I mean, I don't like, can you give me examples?
Let's
Like, yeah, can
say,
you tell me what yours are and then maybe I can more easily answer what mine are?
sure, I am incredibly turned off by like big, loud, boisterous personalities.
So comedians.
Not all. No, like if you're at a party and there's a guy and he's trying to like ham it up and he's the loud one and he's like just needing so much attention. I can't with men that need a lot of attention.
Comedians.
Yeah, I
You
suppose.
basically described
Yeah. But
comedians to
there's
a T.
quiet comedians.
There are definitely who'd save it for the stage.
100%.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
there's a huge difference. I see it more, I think, with or at least I notice it more with female comedians where I'm like, there is a subset of female comedians who are so loud and who it is like the that person show all the time. Like you just can't get a word in when you're around them and they always have to make everything about them and they kind of just like suck the air out of the room and I there are male comedians that do this. I just don't notice it quite as much, but I like to make this joke where I like for men to be seen and not heard. So as soon as a guy is like super needy, talking over me really really loud, making a scene, like acting like a human exclamation point, that is a massive red flag for me.
Well, it's funny. I find that like once I started doing comedy a lot and being a comedian, it's much harder to watch regular people trying to be funny. It's
Yeah.
like it like hurts. It's like, and I'm like, you know what it is? It's like probably what like a doctor would feel like watching people like being like, well, this is what you have. It's like giving diagnoses or stuff. Like you're like, no, you don't know what you're doing.
Hmm.
Stop.
Yeah, that's
And it's like it's unfair because people should just have the right to be. And there are people who are not comedians that are funny,
hmm.
but like it's hard. It is painful to watch people that aren't funny trying to be funny when you are doing. And not trying telling you to stop. Keep doing
You know
you.
what? I just hate trying.
Yeah, yeah.
Stop trying to do
It's
anything.
it's hard.
Trying is gross.
But yeah, no, I know what you mean. People, it's painful when my family's like trying to be funny with me, and they are funny.
Hmm.
My dad is so funny. But where was I going with this? I don't
Well,
remember.
like a trait, let's say you're out on a date with a lady, you notice something that you're like, ooh, I can't recover from this. What is it?
I mean, I would say like a thing I've just kind of like learned, and it's not because this is a red flag, because I've made this mistake before. I'll probably make this mistake again. It's this idea of I often find myself like dating people who I'm like where I find myself being the person I need in the relationship, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. It's like I don't know. It's I've dated comedians before. I don't recommend it. And I'd say the main reason is once you're dating a comedian, it's just like you realize you're both fighting for stage time instead of one of you guys being the other person's audience.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in a way. And that's not saying like, it's not fair to have like one person dominating a relationship, but like I've had much better, more successful relationships, in my opinion, with people who are not entertainment adjacent.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I find that the entertainment people do a better job of understanding the lives we're living.
It is a double-edged sword, but I do like the law of one headshot per relationship.
Yeah, yeah. It just works better.
It does, although there's some, I mean, we certainly know comedy couples that make it work. And I've done it
Totally.
too. I mean, it's been a decade. I've
So
dated a
I
handful of comedians. It
made the
happens.
mistake before, and I may make the mistake again. Um, I think the hardest part of like when I'm no longer in a relationship is like making a mistake and being like, well, if I was still in a relationship, I wouldn't have made that mistake. If
That's
that
giving a lot of credit to the partner.
to oh well, I know it's my fault,
Hmm.
but I'm still just like I'm mad at myself, but I can't help but think that.
Yeah. Are you one of those men that neglects to take care of himself if a woman's not like telling you to do it?
No, no, no. I take care of
Okay,
myself.
good.
I
Because there's
think.
this trope of like guys won't go to the doctor until there's a woman in their life being like, you should probably go to the doctor.
Oh no, I'm getting that insurance money. I pay that insurance, and I'm gonna be on the winning end of that stick.
Yeah, that's good. Are you on the apps or what? Are you in a relationship? I don't even know.
I like I exist on the apps. I
Okay.
haven't opened them
Yeah.
in I like every like once in a blue moon. I feel like the apps are falling off.
They kind of have, haven't they? They've gotten notoriously bad. They've always been notoriously bad. I think people, it's the cool thing to do to make fun of them. But in the last like 6 months to a year, especially Hinge is like putting all the reasonable people behind a paywall. So if you're not paying, you're just getting like the absolute dregs of society.
Which is like it must be hard to find out you're not behind a paywall.
Yeah.
um, but but also it's like there's a quality to like the apps where it's almost like we're talking about this loud person in the room.
Hmm.
Where seeing anyone in an app just feels like they're trying too hard.
I know. It's
It's
like,
like
oh,
it's
you're looking for
there's
love?
something
Barf.
it's like I'm on the app, but then I'll see someone I know on the app, and I'll be
It's
like,
so cringy.
gross.
It's so
What
cringy.
a what a loser doing the
Yeah.
same exact thing I'm doing.
Yeah.
What a pathetic loser being exactly like me.
I've had that thought too. There's nothing more mortifying. Sometimes I want to be like support. I guess it depends on who I see because there's some people I see and I like jump out of my skin at seeing them and I can't left swipe fast enough. But there's other people I see and I'm like, "Oh, buddy, hi. Like, hope it's going better for you than it's going for me." And then I'll give them just like a little acknowledgement of, "Hey,
And also,
we're
it's like,
both here."
how are we? What are we? How are we trying on here?
Yeah,
What's our game plan? What's our presentation of who I am
for
on
sure.
here?
Do you have
It's
a go-to pickup
terrible.
line?
On the I don't know. I think
Or in life, not just on the apps, but in general. What is your you
I
see
don't
a hot lady out at an event. What are you doing to woo her?
drink until I say something I don't know what I no what do- I don't know. I don't know. So there was a period of time where I was meeting women on airplanes a lot, which
Okay.
is crazy.
I like
But
that. That's romantic.
it was like years ago when I had my anxiety was like peak, and I'd meet women in person out in the world, and I'd start talking to them, and I'd start panicking, and I'd be like, I gotta get out of here. What am I doing? You're a loser, Josh. You're gonna fail. And then when I would fly, because I had such incredible flying anxiety, I used to take Xanax. So then just I'd be coincidentally sitting next to an attractive woman. I could not tell you how I opened with any of them, but I went on dates with 4 different women I met on airplanes.
That's a flex.
I was meeting more women on airplanes than off of
Yeah.
airplanes.
You're like, I don't even need to be anywhere. I'm just going to fly to New York
It was
just
like
to meet
when I
somebody.
was making the documentary, I like told my cinematographer one day, I was like, when we were flying somewhere, I was like, I'm telling you, this happens. And then we were on the flight, and he had the aisle seat, and I was in the middle, and there was an attractive girl in the window seat, and and he just like sat there and marveled at how it happened. And I was like, man, I just need to capitalize on what I'm doing here in real life. And I think a big thing that changed in my life, and I really give comedy probably more credit for this than anything, is I think once I got good at comedy, if you think I'm good at comedy, um, it gave me confidence like I never had before. And your whole life, you're trying to talk to girls or things, and everyone's advice is always be confident.
Hmm.
And the idea of be confident is this idea of change the essence of who you are
Right.
as a person. And I would go out and I just like was faking confident. It's like when I'm watching people do stand up, when they walk on stage within 1 second before a word comes out of their mouth, I can tell if they're confident, terrified, or faking confident.
Yeah.
And faking confident, I always found the most offensive of all 3 of them. Because I'd rather see you be terrified and be who you are on stage, which is terrified, because at least it's honest.
At least it's authentic.
And it's honestly a little bit more confident to admit you're terrified
Hmm.
than to fake that. That's the least confident thing. So
Some
when you,
people carry terrified really well on stage.
sure. I could tell you, if you remind me, I could tell you a great story about that. But once I started being confident, I realized all it really is at the end of the day is not caring whether you get rejected or not,
Right.
being equally fine. Like, yeah, you go, you talk to a girl and you hope she's interested in you. If she's not, all well and good. There's plenty of fish in the sea, etc. And even when doing stand up, it's like if you walk on stage and you are terrified of bombing, you'll probably bomb. If you go up on stage and you're like of the shows I produce, like in ways you did Hot Dates.
Hmm.
In ways, Hot Dates is kind of like my favorite right now because
It's so low
it's
stakes.
so low
You're
stakes.
so free.
And I don't feel like I'm myself on any show of mine the way I am on that show.
Hmm.
And I'm just so loose and I'm just feeling so much better on that stage than I do like on any of my other shows where I feel like a pressure to succeed. And it's like, I really want to carry that version of me onto the other shows. And if I could just walk out with that fearlessness that I have there on these other ones, I feel like I'd be, and again, same thing with talking to women. It's just like the fear of bombing, the fear of rejection. If you can get rid of that, that's confidence.
That's really good advice
And
because, yeah.
you'll succeed more on stage and you'll succeed more with girls and you'll have your failures, but you just got to be okay with them.
And then you won't dig a hole further with the failures because um, this is like a scary thing for women in dating, and thankfully it's not like crazy commonplace, but there's men out there where if they sense that they're being rejected, that they then like turn on you and become really aggressive, and all of a sudden it becomes about like tearing a woman down and just like saying nasty things to her and trying to neg her, and then it's like, well, now you're really you could have changed my mind before or something, or like you could have at least made it a civil thing, but
Well, they're
like the
showing who
nastiness
they
then,
really are.
yeah, that's true, which I in a way can be a gift too.
Totally, totally. You don't want to find that out late. I mean, it's funny. A comedian was telling me this, what she said, and it was a really interesting thing about, I think, the struggle for comedians to date.
Hmm.
And also kind of goes back to an earlier thing I was saying about watching non comedians try to be funny. She's like, I'll go on these dates with guys, and it's like afterwards I'm going to a show that I'm doing, and it's like it's very hard for this guy to like win over me wanting to spend my time with them when right after I'm going to hang out with the funniest people in the world. And it's like hard, we're in a profession where we're hanging out with cool people all the
Yeah,
time.
we're spoiled.
We're spoiled by how I don't even want to say cool people, but like fun people to be around in so many ways. Oftentimes unfun people,
Mm-hmm.
but generally speaking, if you're doing
Generally.
good shows with cool people, you're like going to hang out with cool people. And it's hard to find people who you want to spend your time with more necessarily than who you're already spending your time with.
And it feels so embarrassing to bring people that you just started dating around that. I'm very protective of it. I don't want guys that I've just been dating for like a month or two to come see me do a set. I don't want them like anywhere near it. I don't want to introduce my comedian friends to someone that I don't even know if I'm going to like make it
reminds
long term
me
with.
it reminds me of two jokes or
Yeah.
that I recently had, which was I was like, I've met all of my friends, all my comedian friends with boyfriends or girlfriends. I've met none of my married comedian friends, wives or husbands, and I think that's why those worked out.
Yeah.
And then the other thought I had was just like I don't know, yeah, bringing a girl I'm dating to a show is it's like, hey, remember that one thing you thought I had going for myself? Well, here's four random strangers better than me at it. Remember that only thing you thought I had going for me? Well, here's a bunch of people you just met doing it better than I'm doing it.
Yeah, I went on a date last week and I'm always like reluctant, but I'm not trying to hide anything, but I hate bringing it up. I especially hate bringing it up to someone who's like not in the industry at all and I don't know how they're going to receive it and he received it well, but then he was like, "Oh, I want to come to a show." And it's like, "That's the last thing I want from you. I don't want you anywhere near a show."
It's hard. It's hard. Yeah, it's tough. It's so many people, and it's hard to find ones that you. Which is why I think the comedian mistake often happens,
It does often
because
happen.
because that's who you're connecting with,
Right.
and then there's all these other things that make it not work. So when you can find someone who has nothing to do with what you want and you connect, what a magical moment
Yeah.
those are.
That's true. I've been very fortunate. The comedians I've dated, I'm not on like bad terms with anybody. I also almost never run into any of them. I run into one, and the one that I'm like running into the most is the one that I'm also on the best terms with.
Oh,
So
good.
it really worked out great. And everybody else, it's like I'm totally neutral on them, and I just never see them around.
I'm on good terms, I guess, with all of them. The one that I'm on the worst terms with, it's fine now, and we
Hmm.
never run into each other.
Yeah, that's ideal. It's a little, I mean, everyone's like, don't shit where you eat. And then you do anyway. Cause again, like we do feel like we're in the trenches so much with something like this. And it's also like comedy is my
Biggest,
community. Like
I
that,
find,
those are
I
my
find, I
people.
find the biggest thing that has helped me not have like bad relationships with those things is just being respectful, not
100%.
treating them like some piece of shit for sleeping with you. It's
Hmm.
like, how about thanks for that great thing you did for me.
What a simple and poignant thing to say. What a great viewpoint for it. Yes. Hey, if I have had sex with you, maybe be nice to me forever.
Yeah,
How
yeah,
about
yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah. Just like, just don't treat people like they're some piece of shit for not thinking you're the
Yeah,
piece of shit you were for a minute.
exactly. What's the last thing you complained about?
The last thing I complained about,
Hmm.
I mean, I was just, as you can see, I've got the lingering cough that won't go away. I was just sick for like a week. It was awful.
You have any remedies? Go to remedies?
I mean, I just slept. Just
Yeah.
slept for just slept for days. It's terrible. It cost me an acting job,
Ah,
which is so rare. And I had to drop out. I had to drop out day off. I actually got to get my roommate the job because they were so desperate for someone. I was like, my roommate can do it, and I sent him, but that sucked.
yeah, that's not fun.
Um, I always say, it's funny. My like go-to thing now when people are going, "How are you?" is I just go, "Could complain."
I love that.
It's easier than lying and being
Yeah.
like fantabulastic,
Hmm.
or or actually complaining. Just let you know, I could complain.
Yeah.
You don't want to hear it.
And most people are lying anyway when they ask you how you are. It's just part of
Just a thing to
greeting.
say to
It's
get through it.
they don't
Yeah,
want
how
to
many
know.
people like know that someone's mom just died and they're like, "Hey, how you doing?"
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
but I wanted to tell you this one thing about the terrified on stage better than fake
Yes.
confidence. When I took that stand up class in New York, um, which honestly a lot of people shit on stand-up classes. I think it's not a bad way to start because it gives you an environment with a bunch of people as scared as you to like try it out for the first few times. So it makes it easy. And like I don't know if anyone from the stand-up comedy class I took is still doing comedy, but the hardest I've ever seen someone crush in my entire life was, to this day, never seen anything like this. There was this one girl in the class who took the class because she said she had like a horrific fear of public speaking. And she was taking the class to get over her fear of public speaking. And on the class show, she got on stage and she was having a full on meltdown. She was like, I took this class to get over my fear of public speaking. And she was just so genuinely terrified on stage that the audience was dying. There wasn't like a pause in the laughter for her entire 5 minutes as she like near paralysis just like forced through this. Like I don't think anyone even caught like a single joke she was saying. She just talked like this the whole time, and my fear of public speaking, and it was so fucking funny.
Oh
It was
no, but it wasn't
un
intentionally funny.
no, but like it worked. It worked. There was like it wasn't the intent, but it wasn't laughing at her, not with her,
Hmm.
because like what was funny was her saying she had a fear of public speaking and that being on full display.
Hmm.
Like the people were laughing with her. Um she didn't like get off there like embarrassed.
Yeah.
I don't even think she registered what was happening. I'm pretty sure she blacked out through it.
Poor thing.
Um, but yeah, I don't know if that could be a thing that's recreated for her, but like it was incredible. And it was again, there was what was on full display was the truth of that moment.
Yeah, that's the funny part.
That was what was funny. Was how much what she was saying registered with the reality of the moment. It was the most calling out the moment experience I'd ever seen on stage.
It's better to do that than the opposite, but I've like a story of seeing someone just completely ignore the truth and it being funny, but almost in like a we're laughing at him
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
way.
Like what happened?
This kid was like young, early 20s. I think he had just like a leg injury, and for so he was like temporarily in a wheelchair, and he was at a venue, and he was like trying to get up the ramp, but he didn't know how to control the wheelchair yet. So it was his turn to go on stage, and he kept trying to get up the ramp, and then his wheelchair just kept rolling backwards off of the ramp. And the audience couldn't quite see what was happening because the ramp was like in the green room, and then so they were just hearing just like the wheelchair getting up on stage and rolling back and them not seeing anything. And this is going on for like at least 30 seconds. Finally he gets up on stage and we're like, he's gonna address what just happened, right? And he doesn't, and he just barrels right into material. And that was so funny, but not intentionally. Like he just was a little awkward and didn't know what to do and didn't think that he had to address it, so he just didn't, which then created so much more attention. But then I think people were like laughing at him like, are you seriously not going to address that, dude?
You have to address. You have to address. I remember this one time I was doing a show and the comic before me, I've never seen him before, I've never seen him since, just went up on stage, and I don't know if this was his act or what, but he just went on this like looked like he was having a full-on meltdown about how his wife was cheating on him with everyone all over town and calling him to pick her up from like their place, and he was like freaking out about it, and the audience was like not laughing, and they were in like a really weird like headspace, and I had to go up right after him, and I'm like, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do. This guy just like really turned the room, and I walk up after him and I was just like, hey, Steve, this is really awkward, but your wife needs a ride home from my place. And it got a huge laugh, and it just cut the tension. Like
Yeah.
there's tension when something's happening. You just have to acknowledge. It's usually why the first time you acknowledge your bombing, it will get a laugh,
Yep.
and you have a chance to save yourself
Uh-huh.
there. Um, I like have a joke I love to like my go-to I'm bombing hard joke, which I don't get to use very often. Is if I'm like bombing to silence, I'll do a joke and like it'll have a punchline, and if nobody laughs, I will just stand there
Mhm.
in silence for an uncomfortably long time, like just looking at them, not making a sound. Some people usually start to chuckle after a bunch of time goes
Mhm.
by, and then I'll just go, two can play at this game. And that
That's
will
excellent.
usually cut it a little bit. You got to have these tricks.
You gotta
I
have the
often think of it
tricks.
like in basketball, you know, LeBron over the summer will like train with Hakeem Olajuwon to pick up new moves for basketball. And I'm like, a lot of these jokes are moves for situations.
Yeah.
And it's like if you can fill your back pocket. I mean, even when I'm editing for the comic who does lots of crowd work, I'll see the same crowd work plenty of
Yep.
times. They're not the clips I'm cutting because at this point
Of course.
I've probably used it in a thing, but it's just you've now picked up this you come up with it in a random moment off the cuff, but now it's become a move that you have in your pocket prepared for when this happens. And so many times when I'm doing crowd work, a thing that's happened before will happen, and just my natural go-to is the thing I've said before when this happened.
Yeah, the headliners that I've toured with on the road, I've seen them do that because I'll hang back and watch their show. All of a sudden, you see someone do the same hour 5 times in a row. You're like, oh, you're reusing that crowd work every time someone goes to the bathroom. You like make this same comment, and it works every time, and it's fresh for them. So who cares?
Yeah, and it's I mean it's hard to come up with a new one when you've already got like this thing locked and loaded in your
Yeah,
mind. It's like when I'll go to the fourth wall, slotted
back to
mics.
Slotted's full circle.
When I go to the fourth wall slotted mics, and sometimes I'll do their like bucket mic where like they pull topics out of the
Mhm.
bucket. If they pull a topic that I have material on, I don't know how to start writing something new about it. I'm like, I've already got this thing. So it's like my first thought is go to the thing I've already written.
Yeah,
That's why
which
it's good
part
to
of the
do it,
skill?
you know, as you continue to experience all these different. And like one last thing I always say about open mics to people when they complain about a bad open mic. When someone complains about a bad open mic, I'm like, there's no such thing as a bad open mic. Because to me, anything that happens at an open mic, I'm like, well, I'm glad I got the experience there instead of on a show. So that if when it happens on a show, I'm more prepared for it than I was before I did that mic.
Yeah, I mean, that's a beautiful point. We'll end it there. Josh Edelman, thank you so much for
Thank you
coming
so much for
on.
having me,
Where can
Galina.
people find you and your work and your documentaries,
Uh,
your shows?
Mentally Al documentary currently back on Amazon Prime for free for Prime members. You can also watch it on Tubi, I believe, if you don't have a Prime membership, and Tubi's totally free. Follow me at Josh Edelman Comedy on Instagram. I believe I'm the Edelmeister on other apps, but I don't use them that much. Um, Shows I have Well Dressed at the Hollywood Roosevelt, Hot Dates at the Best Comedy Club near me theater, Undiscovered Genius at the Hollywood Improv, and Gripe Juice after brunch show at Bar Covell. And yeah, I think that's all the stuff. Follow me at Josh Edelman. LA Comedy Underground is where I use to promote my shows. Josh Edelman Comedy will have everything.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening, everybody. Bye. shit about that I did. It was Catbird's mic that she does in Culver City at the bookstore.
Oh.
The slotted mic that I did that was